They said I was too embarrassing to sit at the same table. At the family dinner I helped pay for, my daughter-in-law called security to have me removed, and my son just sat there, chewing his steak like I was nothing. But if they thought I was powerless because I dressed modestly and spoke softly, they had no idea what kind of storm was coming. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just stood up, and took everything they thought they owned. You know the funny thing about dignity? People only notice it once they've tried to take it away from you. It was the first time in years that our whole family was supposed to sit together. A big, elegant dinner at a country club my son had recently become a member of, a place where they serve steak so tender you don't need a knife, and the napkins feel like silk. My son Brandon had called it an honor to host the family there. He said it was to thank everyone for their support through his recent promotion. What he didn't say, but what I heard loud and clear, was that I should try not to embarrass him. That came in the form of a phone call 2 days before the event. Just, wear something nice, okay? Brandon had said. Like something new. Something a little more refined. I looked down at the burgundy cardigan I was mending on my lap. It was old, sure, but it was warm. It smelled like cinnamon from my kitchen, and the thread I was using had been my husband's before he passed. Still, I said, "Of course, sweetheart," and left it at that. The night of the dinner, I put on that same cardigan. Not to be defiant, I just liked it. I paired it with a crisp ivory blouse and clean beige slacks. My orthopedic shoes might have looked plain, but they'd carried me through decades of parenting and grief and strength. I brushed my hair, applied some soft lipstick, and rode the bus to the club. When I arrived, everything gleamed. Polished marble floors. A hostess in a black dress with heels taller than I could dream of walking in. Crystal chandeliers that made me blink twice. I stepped into the private dining room, holding a modest gift bag with homemade cookies for the grandkids. As soon as I entered, I saw the looks. My daughter-in-law Megan froze mid-sip of her wine. Her perfectly plucked eyebrows raised just slightly, and she gave me a tight-lipped smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Oh, you made it," she said, voice cool. I smiled and placed the cookies gently at the end of the table, next to where I assumed I'd be sitting. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Megan blinked. "Actually, those seats are kind of taken." Before I could respond, Brandon appeared behind her. He looked like someone out of a magazine, tailored suit, Rolex glinting under the chandelier, not a trace of the boy who used to cry in my lap after nightmares. "Mom," he said, and there was tension in his voice. "Can we talk outside for a second?" I followed him, my heart starting to beat harder. "Outside the room," he sighed. "Megan invited some of her friends, and the table is, well, kind of at capacity," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "So where should I sit?" He hesitated. "Maybe at one of the other tables. There's a lounge area." "Brandon," I said softly, "I'm your mother." He didn't look me in the eyes. "I know. It's just, Megan feels like it's going to ruin the vibe if you're sitting with us. Please, don't make a scene. I'll make it up to you." A scene? I didn't even know what a scene looked like anymore. I was too tired for drama. Too old for public fights. I nodded, turned around, and walked calmly back into the dining room. But when I stepped in, Megan had already called over a club employee. A young man in a white shirt and black vest stood beside her awkwardly. Then she said it. Loud. Clear. In front of everyone. "Could you please escort this guest out of the dining room? We didn't authorize her seat." I felt the entire room pause. Forks froze mid-air. Conversations halted. The grandchildren looked between their parents and me, unsure of what was happening. The young man hesitated. "Ma'am?" he asked me gently. I looked at him, then looked at my son. He didn't say a word. Didn't stand up. Didn't stop her. I took a breath, adjusted the strap of my bag, and said quietly, "Of course." I left the cookies behind. As I walked out of that fancy room, through the glittering marble halls and into the cold night air, something inside me hardened. Not broke. Not cracked. Hardened. They didn't want a scene? Well, I wasn't going to give them a scene. I was going to give them something they'd never forget. I didn't cry on the ride home. I sat on the bus like I always did, back straight, hands folded in my lap, watching the city lights blur past the window. But inside, something cold and sharp was building. Not sadness. Not even anger. Something else. Something quieter, steadier. A kind of knowing. They thought I was small. Powerless. A burden in a thrift store sweater who should be grateful for whatever crumbs they tossed my way. They had no idea. You see, long before Brandon was born, long before Megan ever entered the picture with her glittering rings and rehearsed smiles, I was someone. Not just a mother. Not just a widow. I was a businesswoman. Quiet, sure. Private. But good. In the 1980s, while raising Brandon and working 2 jobs, I started sewing aprons on the side. Then tote bags. Then table runners. I sold them at church fairs, then farmers markets, and eventually online when the internet came around. I never bragged. Never told anyone just how much I made. I didn't need to. By the time Brandon graduated college, my little hobby had turned into a 6-figure income. By the time he got married, I owned 3 small homes, all paid off, and a warehouse outside the city that still shipped my handmade linens across the country. But I let them think I was simple. That I lived off my widow's benefits and coupons. It made them comfortable. And now, after being humiliated in public, it gave me all the power I needed. The next morning, I opened my file drawer and pulled out my old red binder, the one with every deed, receipt, and account summary. Property titles. Business licenses. Proof of ownership. No one ever asked what I did while Brandon was busy chasing promotions and posing for golf course pictures. I didn't tell them. I didn't have to. But now I would. The next week, I made a few calls. First to my lawyer, Gerald, a kind man with silver hair and no tolerance for arrogance. "Is it time?" he asked the moment I said hello. I smiled. "It's past time." We reviewed everything, my living trust, the updated will, the succession plan for the business. I had already removed Brandon years ago as a beneficiary, not out of spite, but out of a quiet understanding that he never saw me as more than a stepping stone. But now, I wanted more than paperwork. I wanted clarity. And I wanted the whole family to hear it. So I planned a dinner of my own. Nothing flashy. No marble floors or silent waiters. Just my home. My food. My invitation. I called each family member personally. "Just a little get-together," I said sweetly. "To celebrate a few things. I'd really love to see you all." They accepted, though some were hesitant. Megan, of course, asked if she could bring her Pilates instructor friend again. "She just loves your pies." I bit my tongue and said yes. Then I got to work. I made place cards. Set the table with fresh flowers. Polished the silverware that once belonged to my mother. And on each plate, I placed a folded letter. One for each of them. By the time the evening came, the house glowed with warm lights and the smell of rosemary roast chicken. The grandkids ran through the hallway. Megan smiled too wide. Brandon stood near the fireplace with his hands in his pockets, surveying the room like he owned it. "Nice place, Mom," he said, tone flat. I forgot how small it was. I smiled back. "It's enough." Dinner was smooth at first. Chatter wine, compliments on the mashed potatoes. Megan even had the nerve to ask if I'd thought about downsizing and moving into a senior community. "You'd be so much more comfortable," she said, buttering her third roll. "And someone could keep an eye on you." I nodded gently. "That's thoughtful." When the plates were cleared and coffee was served, I tapped my glass lightly. "I'd like to say a few words," I said. Brandon gave Megan a look. She raised her eyebrows but said nothing. I stood slowly, letting the silence gather around me. "Last week," I began, "I was asked to leave a dinner because I was told I didn't belong." The room went stiff. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I simply walked out. But I think now, it's time you understand exactly what I walked back to. I motioned to the letters on each plate. "Please open them." Rustling paper. A few gasps. Megan's mouth actually dropped open. Because inside each envelope was a breakdown, neat, clear, undeniable, of every property I owned, every business I managed, every account with my name on it. It was a portfolio bigger than Brandon's ego could have ever imagined. And at the bottom of each page, a single line. "None of this will go to anyone who treats me as disposable." Brandon's face paled. Megan tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "I don't say this to boast," I said calmly. "I say this to draw a line. From this point on, I won't be disrespected, dismissed, or discarded. If you wish to be part of my life, you come with humility and honesty, not entitlement." One of the grandkids whispered, "Whoa." The silence stretched thick and stunned. Then slowly, I sat down and took a sip of my coffee. I didn't need applause. I didn't need praise. I had reclaimed something better than that, my place, my voice, and their attention. You could have heard a pin drop. The only sound after I sat back down was the tick of the old grandfather clock in the hallway, its slow rhythmic talk cutting through the silence like a metronome of disbelief. Brandon stared at the paper in front of him like it had grown fangs. "Megan?" Her manicured hand trembled as she tried to fold the letter back into its envelope, but it wouldn't fit, like the truth had grown too large to shove away. "I didn't know," Brandon started, his voice hollow. "I know you didn't," I said simply, not unkindly. "You never asked. They say money changes people. That's not true. It reveals them. And that dinner, the one they kicked me out of, revealed everything I needed to know. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as furniture." I watched Megan glance at Brandon, trying to mask her panic with a forced smile. "Well, this is wow. It's amazing, really. I had no idea you had so much going on, business-wise." Her voice pitched up like a teenager caught sneaking in past curfew. I tilted my head, letting the moment breathe. "Megan," I said gently, "do you remember what you said to me at that dinner? When the guard walked over?" Her cheeks flushed. I think it was taken out of context. "You said I was embarrassing. That I should be grateful for the free food, because paupers don't get holiday meals this nice." Even now, saying the words made my stomach churn. I leaned forward just slightly. "You don't get to insult me and then call this amazing. You wanted a pauper. Now you're sitting across from the reason your rent gets paid on time every month." Brandon blinked. "Wait, what does that mean?" I let it hang for a second. "Your building. The one you and Megan live in." Pause. "I own it." The silence? Deafening. Brandon's mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. "You're lying," Megan muttered. "I can pull the deed out of the filing cabinet if you'd like," I replied, my voice calm and sharp as a knife under velvet. "I bought it 4 years ago when the previous landlord went bankrupt. You know how hard it was to evict that noisy couple upstairs? You're welcome, by the way." The sound that came out of Megan's throat was somewhere between a laugh and a choke. You never said a word." "Because I don't need validation, Megan. I need respect." Brandon ran both hands down his face, suddenly 10 years older. "So what happens now? You gonna kick us out?" I looked him in the eyes. "No. I'm not vindictive. But from this point forward, I am done being silent." I stood up again and walked to the side table, pulling out a small stack of typed notices, clean, professional, stamped with my attorney's name at the bottom. "Effective immediately, I'm restructuring the inheritance." That got their attention. No more trust fund for appearances. No more guaranteed safety net. From here on out, it's earned, not assumed. The papers were simple. A legal amendment to my will, listing charitable organizations, my business partners, and select grandchildren, the ones who'd sent me birthday cards even when their parents didn't bother. Brandon scanned the document with trembling fingers. "Mom, please." I raised one eyebrow. "Now I'm mom again?" He shut his mouth. "I'll still help," I said. "But not out of guilt or pressure. I'll help those who treat me with decency. Not those who throw me to the curb at a steakhouse because I don't fit their curated image." The words landed like thunder in a silent church. One of the grandkids, the youngest, reached for my hand under the table. "I'm sorry they were mean to you," he whispered. And just like that, the weight on my chest cracked. Not because I forgave them, but because I knew I wasn't invisible anymore. The fallout began immediately after dinner. By the time the dishes were washed and the guests were gone, Megan had already posted a fake smile photo of the family at my dining table on her social media. Caption: "Such a lovely evening with our amazing family matriarch Redheart, #blessed, #humble, #thankful." She never tagged me. She didn't dare. But people talk. Especially when they start realizing the apartment they're renting in the city. The one with the shady landlord who suddenly turned responsive and generous? That's me. Tenants started learning my name. And respecting it. Brandon tried calling the next day, twice. I didn't answer. On the third attempt, he left a voicemail. I know I screwed up, Mom. But please, can we talk? Just us. It took me 3 days to reply. When I did, I kept it short. You can come by Saturday. But leave your pride at the door. By Saturday morning, I was ready. I'd spent the last few days digging deeper, not into revenge but clarity. I met with my financial team. Updated every file. Rebalanced accounts. Wrote handwritten notes to each of my tenants, thanking them for being part of my quiet success. And I began preparing to tell my full story. Not just to my family, but to the world. Because there are thousands of us. The quiet ones. The too old, the unwanted, the ones laughed at during dinners and ignored in boardrooms and grocery store lines. But what they don't realize is this: just because we've learned to sit still, doesn't mean we don't know how to stand. And I was done sitting. People always think power comes with shouting. With big entrances. Dramatic speeches. But real power? Real power walks in quiet and leaves the room shaking. Saturday arrived. I didn't bother baking cookies or wearing pearls. I didn't set out a fresh bouquet or try to make the house look warm like I used to when my son would visit. This time, I was all business. Same maroon cardigan. Same soft curls brushed neat. Same quiet fire in my chest. The doorbell rang at 10:05. I opened it to find Brandon standing alone. No Megan. No excuses. Just him, looking like a little boy trying to remember how to say sorry without breaking his ego. Hi, he mumbled. I stepped aside. Come in. He walked in slowly, glancing around like the furniture might scream at him. I wasn't expecting you to actually let me come, he said. I said what I meant, I replied. I always have. You just weren't listening. He sat down at the dining room table. I didn't offer coffee. This wasn't a social visit. I messed up, he said. We messed up. And I don't know what else to say other than, I'm sorry. I studied him. Are you sorry because you hurt me, or because you lost access to my money? His eyes darted away. I don't care about the money. I raised an eyebrow. Your reaction at dinner said otherwise. He sighed. Okay. I cared. I mean, yeah, we didn't know, but that's not the point. The point is, you're my mother, and I let them humiliate you. I should have stood up. I should have protected you. I folded my hands on the table. So why didn't you? He didn't answer. Not really. Just sat there, ashamed. And maybe that was enough for now. I didn't need a protector, Brandon. I needed a son who saw me as more than a burden. And the worst part. I leaned forward slightly. You were raised better than this. I taught you better than this. I know. He looked like he might cry. But I didn't comfort him. I kept quiet for years, I said. While you and Megan flaunted designer shoes and Instagram perfect parties, I stayed silent. I watched you grow into someone I barely recognized. And I kept making excuses because I didn't want to lose you. He opened his mouth to speak, but I shook my head. No. You need to listen. He did. I opened the folder I'd left in the center of the table. Inside were copies of the deeds. The will. The full breakdown of my investments. And a letter. The same letter I planned to publish, soon. I'm going public, I told him. His eyebrows shot up. What do you mean? I'm telling my story. The woman they called a pauper at a family dinner? The one they mocked and tossed out like she didn't matter? That woman owns 7 properties, built 2 companies from scratch, and has fed more people than your wife has ever thanked. I stood up and walked toward the living room shelf. Picked up a photograph. You remember this? I asked. It was the first house I ever bought. Tiny. Faded paint. But it was mine. You were 6. You helped me paint the door red. You said it made the house feel happy. He nodded slowly, as if each memory came back like a punch. I kept every letter you wrote me from camp, I said. I sewed the patches on your scout uniforms. I stayed up all night when you had the flu, even when I was working 2 jobs and could barely walk straight. And somehow, all of that disappeared the second I no longer fit Megan's image of valuable. He whispered she was wrong. You both were, I corrected gently. But now I'm going to show the world that being invisible doesn't mean being powerless. He looked stunned. You're really going to tell people what happened? I nodded. Not just what happened. Why it matters. How many people are dismissed just like me, because of their age, their silence, their lack of Instagram value. I'm going to publish my truth. Loudly. I could see it hit him, the weight of what I was saying. This wasn't a private shame anymore. This would be a public reckoning. I don't want to stop you, he said quietly. I know I don't deserve to. But I do want to earn back your trust. Somehow. I paused. There's a fundraiser next week, I said after a moment. Downtown. For the shelter I support. The one you didn't even know I funded. He blinked. Come work the door with me. No tux. No photos. Just sweat and service. He hesitated. Megan won't like it. I smirked. That's not my concern. He nodded. Okay. I'll be there. Good, I said. Because if you want to be in my life again, you're going to earn it. Just like everything else in this world worth having. As he left, I watched him go, not with hate, but clarity. Forgiveness might come one day. But right now? This was justice. And I wasn't done yet. People always say karma takes its time. But when you're the one driving karma's bus, you get to pick the speed. And I was in no mood for slow. The fundraiser I mentioned to Brandon? It wasn't just a shelter benefit. It was my quiet declaration of war, dressed in a pearl clasp and a press pass. I spent the week preparing, not just the event, but the reveal. The truth I'd been collecting and polishing like heirloom silver. The facts. The paper trail. The photos. You see, people forget that just because you're quiet doesn't mean you're blind. I'd watched Megan build her empire on borrowed wealth, leased status, and gifted branding. She built an influencer persona that painted her as a generous, self-made woman, all while leeching off family money, most of it from my trust fund via Brandon. They never once asked where it came from. They assumed it came from his side. They assumed wrong. The night of the event arrived. I wore a midnight blue shawl, simple earrings, and a knowing smile. My silver-gray bob was freshly trimmed, and I walked into that venue with the confidence of someone who owned more of the city than anyone suspected. Brandon stood at the check-in table just like I asked. Polite. Nervous. Unshaven. Everything set up inside, he said quietly. People are asking who you are. Good, I replied, handing him a crisp donation list. They'll know soon. The guests were high-end. Local press. Small business owners. A few real estate agents. But the key people? My board. The ones who helped me turn 2 duplexes into 7 housing units. The lawyer who helped me transfer the LLCs without Brandon knowing. The reporter who'd read my letter and asked if I'd consider doing a feature. Oh, and Megan. She showed up fashionably late, in a red designer dress and the confidence of someone who thinks the world revolves around their Instagram likes. She didn't recognize the venue at first. Too busy snapping selfies at the floral arch and tagging brands. Until she spotted Brandon. And me. Wait, what is this? She asked, walking up, eyes narrowing. This is my event, I replied calmly. I'm the sponsor. Megan blinked like I'd spoken in a foreign language. You sponsored a fundraiser? No. I built the fundraiser, I corrected. This is the 3rd year I've hosted it. The past 2 years were under a silent LLC. This time, I chose to sign my name. She stared, lips parted. I could almost hear the wheels turning, trying to calculate how the woman she called a pauper now had her name printed on everything from the banner to the programs. And that's when the MC took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to take a moment to thank our primary donor and founder, the woman behind the Safe Steps Housing Initiative, Margaret Blake. That's me. People clapped. Reporters snapped photos. Megan looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. But the best part? The short video that followed. A montage. Quiet piano. My voice narrating. My name is Margaret. I was called poor, invisible, forgotten. But behind closed doors, I was building. While others chased spotlights, I laid bricks. This is what a life of quiet strength can build, and this is who they tried to push away. Clips rolled of the properties, the renovations, the families who moved in. And finally, the photo. A single image from the family dinner. Blurry, but clear enough. Me, standing beside the table. Megan mid-sentence, pointing at me like I was the help. The caption? They told me I didn't belong. I built a place where others would. The silence that followed? Electric. And Megan? She stormed out. Brandon didn't chase her. He just stayed by the check-in table, shoulders squared, face pale. I walked over to him after the crowd began mingling again. I didn't do this to embarrass you, I said. I did it to reclaim my name. I know, he replied. And I'm proud of you. He meant it. A part of me wanted to cry. But I didn't. Not yet. There was still one more piece to set in place. Because after the guests had left and the photos had been taken, I pulled out an envelope. I need you to sign this, I told Brandon. He read it. A formal revision of my will. Previously, he and Megan were set to inherit the majority of my estate, before everything happened. Now? A significant portion would be donated to housing initiatives, women's shelters, and young mothers trying to escape toxic households. The rest? It would be divided between charities and the grandchildren. Only the grandchildren. If Brandon wanted his piece, he'd need to re-earn my trust, not just with words, but with action. This is fair, he said, slowly signing. I nodded. I don't want revenge, Brandon. I want truth. I want dignity. And I want to make sure no one ever gets discarded the way I was. He hugged me then. Tight. Real. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had my son back. But make no mistake. I still made them choke on every inch of truth they tried to bury. And I'd do it again. People still talk about that fundraiser. Not just because of the money it raised, though it did break every record we'd set. But because of what it revealed. The truth. The story behind the woman they thought was just someone's forgotten mother-in-law. The story I let them assume, until the moment I reclaimed it. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Local press ran the story under headlines like, "From cast out to queenmaker, how one retired widow quietly built an empire." The mother-in-law they laughed at now owns half their block. Even people from my old church reached out, stunned. One woman called just to say, "You're the talk of Sunday service," in the best way. Funny, how people only listen when there's a headline. But what mattered more than the noise was the silence that followed, from Megan. Not a word. No apology. No phone call. She posted a cryptic quote on social media, "Some people will do anything to steal your spotlight." And then she went silent. I heard through Brandon that she tried to spin the event, say I ambushed her. But the truth didn't leave her any room. Too many people saw it. Too many had felt that same pain of being overlooked, dismissed, disrespected, and now they had a face to rally behind. Mine. And oh, how sweet it was to finally be seen. Brandon started coming around more. Alone, at first. Quietly. He'd sit at my kitchen table like he used to, asking about the properties, the shelters, the families I'd helped. "How did you hide all this from us?" he asked once, his eyes a little damp. I sipped my tea and answered honestly. "You weren't looking, sweetheart. None of you were. You only saw what you wanted to see, a burden. A name on a holiday invite. An old woman who needed a ride." He looked down. Ashamed. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The silence spoke louder. Eventually, the grandkids started visiting too. Not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. They'd help me bake. Ask about the garden. One of them, my youngest granddaughter, even asked if she could help with my next community project. I said yes. Because while I may not have gotten the warm, perfect family dinners I dreamed of in my later years, I was building something else now. A legacy. One made not from obligation or appearances, but from strength, truth, and earned respect. There was a moment, a few months later, that stays with me. The city held a small ceremony to recognize community leaders. My name was on the list. They gave me a plaque, a microphone, and 5 minutes to speak. I looked out at the small crowd, neighbors, council members, 2 of my grandchildren in the front row, and I said, I was called a burden, a pauper. I was told I didn't belong at the table. So I built my own. And now I invite those who were once forgotten, because no one deserves to be made invisible. Not ever again. Applause. Real. Earned. After the event, Brandon walked up, tears in his eyes. He hugged me tight. I was wrong, he whispered. About everything. I know, I said. But now you see me. He nodded. And that was enough. As for Megan, she's still around, technically. Still posting, still posing. But people see through it now. Because you can only fake kindness so long before the truth comes knocking. And I came knocking loud. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about power, the quiet kind. The kind that simmers, waits, then rises without needing permission. They called me a pauper. Now I fund the programs their kids rely on. They tried to cast me out. Now they have to scroll past my name in headlines, printed plaques, and property deeds. Funny, isn't it? I was once the invisible one. Now I'm the reason they can't look away. And I've never felt richer.